That night, the truck's radio crackled with a voice so low it seemed to come from inside my head, not the device. If you hear the pigs, don't turn on any lights. I laughed nervously because there were still 12 kilometers of dirt road left until my Uncle Mauro's ranch, and the old man was already known for inventing superstitions to scare visitors. But at the exact moment the message ended, something slammed into the side of the vehicle with a dull thud, as if a heavy animal had thrown itself against the door. I slammed on the brakes, the steering wheel nearly ripping out of my hands, and the headlights swept through the darkness before us. There was nothing on the road, only tall grass, a crooked fence, and further ahead, a rotten, sweet and warm smell rising from the blackness like the breath of an open grave. My name is Daniel, and I wouldn't have gone to that place if it wasn't for my mother's call 3 days earlier, saying Uncle Mauro was losing his mind and needed my help to settle ranch matters. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but my mother insisted so much that I finally agreed. In truth, I also needed the money he had promised. The ranch was isolated, near a region almost no one frequented, a forgotten corner of the countryside where the night seemed to lie down on the earth and never get up again. When I was a child, we spent vacations there. Scattered memories remained. The porch creaking, the sound of crickets, my Aunt Clarice calling from the kitchen, and the pigs in the pen behind the shed, always restless, always shoving each other, always kicking up a smell of mud and iron from the dirt. I hated that pen. They looked at you like sick people. After my aunt died, Uncle Mauro changed. He became thinner, more gaunt, with deep shadows under his eyes. He cut contact with everyone, stopped going to town, and neighbors started saying he sold meat to an illegal slaughterhouse or performed ancient rituals with animal remains. Country stories, I thought. Things that grow when people talk too much and see too little. Still, when I accepted the call to go there, I felt a strange pang, as if something inside me recognized the mistake before my reason did. The impact on the side of the truck came again, stronger this time. This time I heard the scratching of nails or hooves against the metal, a desperate and brutal sound, scraping the paint like a blunt knife. My cousin Leo, who was traveling with me, curled up in the passenger seat. He was the son of one of Mauro's sisters and had been raised in the city, never giving much importance to family stories. He was the typical guy who laughs at everything until the moment he stops. "There's something out there on the side," he whispered. "There's nothing," I lied, my throat dry. The scratching stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It wasn't the normal silence of the countryside, full of insects and wind. It was a void, as if the entire road had been swallowed by something holding its breath. Then we saw the ranch gate. It was wide open, swaying slowly in the wind. The padlock hung broken, snapped in half. On the fence post, someone had nailed a piece of wood with dripping red paint. When the headlights hit the sign, I could read the crooked, almost childlike words written in haste, "Do not enter at night." Leo let out a nervous laugh. "What kind of joke is this?" I tried to convince myself that was it. The ranch raised pigs. Uncle Mauro always had. But there was something in the sound that didn't seem animal. It sounded like hunger, an endless hunger. I pushed the truck through the gate and followed the dirt track slowly. The house appeared at the top of the small hill, like a dark stain against the night. Windows dark, the porch surrendered to the wind. To the left, the shed. To the right, the pig pen. And it was from the pen that the smell came. Not just manure or mud, but a stale, thick stench of rotting meat, dried blood and rust, the kind of smell that gets into your mouth. I got out of the car with a flashlight in hand. The beam sliced the dark and first found the packed dirt, then deep hoof prints in the mud, then a drag trail leading from the pig pen to the house porch. They weren't pig tracks. They looked like they were made by a heavy body being pulled toward the woods. "Your uncle left this open," I said, more to myself than to Leo. He didn't answer. He was staring fixedly at the pen. The pigs were inside, but they weren't the ones I remembered. I even hesitate to call them pigs. They were enormous, with thick, filthy coats, their skin marked by circular scars and dark crusts. Their bellies hung heavy over their legs. Some had eyes that were almost white, opaque, as if blindness had made them more violent. One of them lay on its side, motionless, and the others nibbled at it with voracious haste, tearing off pieces with the calmness of those who had done it many times before. The sound was wet, insistent, and the cracking of bones under their teeth echoed in my stomach. Leo turned his face away, disgusted. What hell is this? The interior of the house smelled of mold, kerosene, and something else. Something putrid. The kitchen was filthy, with pots thrown in the sink, plates with dried remains, and dead flies stuck to the tiles. On the table were 3 empty plates and a large knife stained with dark brown. There were finger marks on the tabletop, as if someone had gripped the wood hard to keep from falling. "Dad?" Leo called, but his tone was more of a whisper than a call. Nothing. We went up the narrow hallway. The floorboards groaned under our steps. As we approached Uncle Mauro's room, a noise began to grow behind the wall. It wasn't the sound of someone walking. It was like nails or teeth scraping from inside the wood. The bedroom door was locked. I knocked twice and called for my uncle. No response, so I put my shoulder to it and pushed. The door gave way with a dry snap, opening into a dark, stuffy room where the air felt like it had been stagnant for days. My uncle was sitting on the edge of the bed, his back to us. "My God," Leo murmured. Mauro's body was hunched forward, his shoulders trembling slightly. I thought he was crying or having some kind of seizure. But as I took another step, I saw he was holding something in his hands, a glass jar. Inside it were teeth. Many teeth, animal teeth and human teeth, mixed in an off-white mass, some small as grains and others too long for any living thing I knew. "Daniel," he said, without turning his face. His voice sounded hoarse, scratched, as if he hadn't used words in weeks. "You came late?" Leo asked, unable to hide his trembling. Mauro let out a humorless laugh, the ones who are hungry. A pale eye appeared shortly after, following the movement of the light. The animal was breathing fast, as if it were excited. Then I saw the teeth. They weren't normal pig teeth. They were too long, too crooked, thin as needles, and some had red stains clinging to the tips. The creature opened its mouth and touched its tongue to the glass with obscene slowness, leaving a moist trail. Mauro jumped up and slammed the flashlight off the table. Darkness fell over us like ice water. "Don't look through the window," he hissed. "Don't call out, don't light anything, they learn." The house was now almost completely dark, except for a sliver of red light coming from the end of the hallway. In the living room, I noticed a kind of makeshift altar. Unlit candles, spilled salt, old photographs, a basin with dark water, and a leather collar hanging from a stake. Beside it, a cloth bag twitched slightly as if something inside was still breathing. "Uncle?" Leo asked again, but now there was pure fear in his voice. Mauro pushed us toward the kitchen. "If you want to understand, first help me close the shed, then I'll explain." Mauro grabbed an old shotgun leaning behind the door, checked if it was loaded, and signaled for us to follow. We went out the back, passing through an area of packed dirt where there were more marks on the ground, along with scattered bits of feed and small white bones, cleaned too well. The smell there was almost unbearable, a mix of fresh blood, feces and meat exposed to the sun for too long. But it was night, and that made everything even more wrong. The shed was a few meters from the house. The wallboards were swollen with moisture, and the wooden door had been reinforced with metal bars. Mauro approached the chain with trembling hands. Before opening it, he looked at us and said, very slowly, "If anything comes out of there, don't shoot for the head first. First, look into the eyes. If the eyes are white, you're lost. If they're black, run." The interior of the shed was divided into 2 parts. The first looked like a tool storage area. Feed sacks, metal troughs, and stacked wooden crates. The second, separated by bars, was a dark compartment where I could only distinguish large shapes moving slowly. There was also a door at the back, half open, from which came a draft of cold, damp air like the breath of a cave. Mauro pointed the gun into the dark. "They're too quiet." It was a human voice, very low, almost affectionate. "Daniel." My mother's voice continued coming from the dark, now mixed with muffled crying. "Son, please." There was something very human in them, something of despair and pain. The door swung open all at once, and the first thing that came out was a smell so strong it made me recoil, wanting to vomit. Then came the thing. It was a pig, or what was left of one. Gigantic, its body covered in pink skin split open in gashes as if it were being sewn and unsewn for days. The snout was too flat, and the mouth opened to an impossible width, filled with human teeth. Yes, human teeth, I'm certain. Asymmetric rows, some crooked, others broken, planted where tusks or molars should be. The eyes, black as wet coal, shone with a sickly intelligence, and when it raised its head, I recognized a chain hanging from its neck with a rusted pendant. My Aunt Clarice's wedding ring tied with a piece of wire. Leo screamed. Mauro fired again, hitting the creature's shoulder. Instead of falling, it advanced with absurd speed. The impact knocked my uncle to the ground, and the beast sank its fangs into his arm. The sound was horrific, a wet snap, followed by a scream that sounded like someone being torn in half. I grabbed a hoe leaning against the wall and swung a blind blow at the creature's head. I felt the weight of the hit travel through the handle, but it only turned its face and stared at me. In that moment, I saw the worst thing of my life. In the depths of those black eyes was a tiny human reflection, as if someone was still alive in there, trapped behind the hunger. The creature let go of Mauro's arm and fled into the night, crashing through the side of the shed with impossible ease, as if the boards were paper. Then the others started coming out. 1, 2, 5, maybe more. Pigs of different sizes, all wrong. Some with small horns growing where they shouldn't be, others without ears, others with open scars that moved like mouths. They scattered across the yard, sniffing the air. And then I understood that the sound I heard at the beginning wasn't just hunger, it was relief, as if they were waiting for the right door to be opened so they could finally come out. "To the house!" Mauro shouted, his bloody arm hanging at his side. "Now!" Behind us, the grunts echoed in chorus, and the sound of hooves on the dirt sounded like a war drum. We went through the back door and locked it from the inside, but the wood was already beginning to shake from the impacts outside. Someone, or something, was throwing itself against the entire house, testing the walls, the back, the windows. In the kitchen, Mauro thrust his wounded arm into the sink and turned the tap on full. The water came out red. He cursed, ripped a dish towel, and tied it around the wound with gritted teeth. "What are those things?" Leo asked, pacing in circles like a cornered animal. My uncle looked at him with a weariness so old he looked 30 years older in the face. "They are what happens when hunger is left loose for too long. And now there are monsters in your shed, blood in your house, and an animal wearing my aunt's ring. At first I thought it was tiredness. Then the dead things came, beheaded chickens in the yard, missing dogs. When I checked, the pigs were bigger, more aggressive. One of them tore open a calf's chest by itself. Another ate the eyes of a farmhand who wandered in here drunk. I tried to sell everything, close the ranch, but it was too late. He said that when hunger was fed with too much meat and too much fear, it learned the way back. I saw then that its skin was covered in small pieces of fabric, as if it had lain on top of torn clothes, and between the folds was a tuft of grey hair. It wasn't the animal's. It belonged to someone. Mauro raised the shotgun and fired. The pig fell, but not like a dead beast. It fell thrashing, panting, as if the shot had only interrupted an attempt to climb. "Killing isn't enough," he said, trembling. "They come back as long as there is hunger. It's not just the others. And among the records, repeated phrases: "Do not let the mother pig give birth. The fourth corner cannot be opened. If you hear the voice of the dead, it is already too late. The mother pig is not the strongest. She is the oldest, and she is not in the pen." I raised my eyes slowly. Then where is she? Her face was almost unrecognizable, covered in dark patches of dirt and dried blood, but the eyes were human. I knew those eyes even before the brain could accept it, my mother, or what was left of her. Leo let out a strangled sound, half sob, half scream. "No." "You aren't her," I said, though a part of me kept begging for her to be. She tilted her head with a grotesque calmness. "I was," she replied, "for a time." Leo ran for the back door, but before he reached the exit, something slammed from the outside, and the lock shattered. A pig entered through the broken door, sliding almost sideways, and sank its teeth into his leg. Leo's scream echoes in my memory to this day. It wasn't just pain, it was the sudden realization that he was being pulled into something with no way back. I ran with the hoe and hit the animal in the back. Then again, feeling the vibration through the handle. It let go of Leo for a second, enough for my cousin to crawl near the sink, bleeding heavily. The thing that was my mother turned to me and smiled with a mouth full of rust and moisture. "You still don't understand," she said. "We didn't come to get you. We came to show you." A deep, cavernous growl, followed by a dull creaking, as if the floor was splitting from the inside out. Mauro turned terrifyingly pale. "No, no, no, no!" The floor under our feet snapped. A board rose in the center of the kitchen, then another, as if something huge was pushing from beneath. A dark liquid began to leak through the cracks, and the smell that rose was so strong, my eyes watered. Then the wood gave way all at once. What came out from under the house didn't seem to fit into any category of the world. It was a mass of moist meat and stretched skin, with an enormous hairless snout resting on legs that were too crooked. There were dozens of eyes, some open, others half sewn shut, as if several bodies had been fused into a single hungry being. Between the folds of flesh, I recognized human fingers, teeth, pieces of ears, a watch chain, a shirt button, a braid of hair. The creature breathed like a furnace, and in the center of it, caught between layers of flesh, was the head of an older woman, her lips dry, her eyes burned white. She opened her mouth and spoke with a voice that came from everywhere at once. "Feed me." They were just the form hunger took to find a body. The thing under the house was bigger, older, and had learned to use people as living fences to grow. My aunt, my uncle, my mother, maybe my grandfather before them, they had all participated somehow. Some out of fear, others by choice, others because hunger convinces you so easily when you're already empty inside. Mauro stood up with difficulty and opened the notebook to the last page, where there was a rough drawing of the house's crawl space. In the center, a cross marked over a red spot. "It's there," he said, pointing to the hidden cellar under the stove. "The root. If I burn the root, maybe it stops." My whole body wanted to run, but the sound under the house kept me pinned there, as if I had already been chosen. Mauro opened the floor hatch with a rusted key. A breath of mold and darkness rose from the hole. Down there was a narrow ladder and a hallway of excavated earth. It looked like the inside of a tomb. He handed me a gallon of kerosene. "If I don't come back," he said, "you burn everything. You already came with me a long time ago, Daniel. You just didn't know it." One of them threw itself into the cellar after Mauro. Another climbed directly onto her body and disappeared into the moving flesh. I grabbed Leo by the shoulder, trying to drag him. He was in shock but still breathing. Blood soaked his leg, and his face was gray. "You need to walk," I said, even without knowing if he heard me. The cellar door down there slammed shut. Then a scream from Mauro rose from inside the earth, a scream that started human and ended as something I cannot name. The creature under the house contorted. The entire structure creaked. Part of the floor sank. The walls began to split into thin cracks through which a dark, oily smoke escaped, smelling of burning meat. I realized there was no turning back. I dragged Leo to the kitchen window and pushed him out through the shards of glass and the rain of mud. The yard was filled with moving shadows. I ran after him, nearly slipping in blood and dirt, as the house behind us began to emit a deep, continuous sound, like the groan of a massive thing being awakened from within the world itself. When I looked back, I saw the kitchen window lit from inside with a sickly red glow. My mother's silhouette appeared for a moment, motionless, looking directly at me. There was no hate on her face. There was relief. And that was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. Because in the midst of that horror, it seemed she had finally stopped fighting. The explosion came from the cellar. It wasn't a clean explosion. It was a rupture. The floor rose, the entire house split in half, and a column of fire climbed through the wooden structure with the roar of a blast furnace. The pigs fled in every direction, squealing, running for the woods, some throwing themselves against the fence, others falling over and thrashing as if the fire were burning something beyond their skin. The flash lit up the whole yard for a second, and I saw dozens of human footprints mixed with animal tracks around the house, as if that hunger had walked in two forms for a very long time. Leo fell to the ground again, crying and laughing at the same time in broken despair. I knelt beside him, but I couldn't take my eyes off the burning house. In the center of the fire, for an impossible instant, I saw Mauro's figure in the cellar, or maybe just a shadow of it, lifting his face like someone finally accepting his end. And behind him, a row of white eyes lighting up in the smoke, one by one, like embers. When the roof collapsed, the sound was so loud it threw me against the mud. I lay there, winded, my ears ringing, watching Uncle Mauro's house become a living bonfire against the night. The smell of charred meat took over the ranch. The remaining pigs disappeared into the woods, but I knew, with a certainty as deep as the fear freezing me, that it didn't mean victory, only dispersal. Dawn broke slow and grey over the smoking ruins. The sky looked sick. I found Leo still alive, though feverish and delirious. His leg was raw, and every step was a groan. There was no sign of Mauro, or my mother, or any answer that made sense. Only ashes, mud, and drag marks leading toward the thick woods. Before we left, I saw something near the gate. A new sign, driven crooked into the mud. It wasn't there when I arrived. It had been nailed with a rusted nail and painted with the same red paint as before. But now the phrase was different. "Thank you for opening." I couldn't move my legs for a second. The wind shook the sign, and behind it the woods remained still, far too quiet as if listening. I never went back to the ranch. Leo survived but spent months saying he heard pigs walking inside the walls of his room. My mother disappeared without a trace, and Mauro's death certificate was never issued. The police found only charred remains and an empty pig pen. No explanation, no proof. To everyone else, it was just a fire in an abandoned rural property. But sometimes in the silence of the night, I smell it again. Mud, blood, burning wood, and then I hear the radio crackling low as if a very distant voice were testing the way back. At first, I thought it was memory. Then I realized it was coming from the yard. Today, I live in the city, in a fifth-floor apartment, far from dirt, far from the woods, far from all that. But 3 weeks ago, when I woke in the middle of the night, I found mud marks on the balcony, small, deep, fresh hoof prints. And beside them, on the glass wall of the living room, a reflection that wasn't mine. It was of an enormous pig standing right behind me. When I turned around, there was nothing. Only the dark of the living room, the impossible smell of wet earth, and a patient hunger breathing on the other side of the door.